You tell yourself you are strong. You believe you can handle anything life throws your way, yet here you are, feeling stuck in the same old patterns. It's a familiar frustration, isn't it? That constant battle against yourself, the one where you vow to change but somehow end up right back where you started. This internal tug-of-war is more common than you might imagine, a silent struggle playing out in countless lives every single day. We build mental frameworks designed for progress, for forward momentum, but often these very structures become the invisible cages that hold us captive. It's like having a powerful engine but forgetting to release the parking brake. Consider the sheer volume of people who start new habits with immense determination, only to see those resolutions fade within weeks, sometimes even days. This isn't a sign of personal failure. It's a symptom of a deeper misunderstanding of how our minds actually work when faced with difficulty. The science behind this phenomenon is quite revealing. A comprehensive review of academic interventions for academic procrastination, published in the Journal of Preventive Intervention in the Community in 2018, shed significant light on this persistent issue. Researchers meticulously examined numerous studies, looking for effective strategies to combat the urge to delay tasks. What they found was both illuminating and, for many, deeply surprising. The core problem wasn't a lack of desire to succeed or a deficiency in willpower. Instead, the studies pointed towards a critical disconnect in how individuals approach their challenges. Many interventions focused on external motivators or simple time management techniques, which, while helpful in the short term, failed to address the underlying psychological mechanisms at play. Imagine a gardener diligently watering a plant, but the soil is compacted and lacks nutrients. The water will run off, and the plant will struggle to thrive. Similarly, many efforts to overcome procrastination are like watering barren ground. They lack the essential elements for true growth and lasting change. The academic literature revealed that strategies focusing solely on task completion or reward systems often missed the mark. People would still find ways to avoid tasks, even if they knew the consequences or the eventual reward. This suggests that the root cause of procrastination isn't simply laziness, but a more intricate interplay of emotions, beliefs, and self-perception. One particular study highlighted in the review involved a group of university students struggling with essay writing. They were given elaborate planning tools and strict deadlines, but their anxiety levels remained high and their output was inconsistent. They were technically equipped, yet emotionally paralyzed. This is where the concept of resilience truly comes into play, but not in the way most people understand it. True resilience isn't just about bouncing back from setbacks. It's about how you engage with those setbacks. Are you simply enduring them, or are you actively learning and growing from the experience? The research indicated that individuals who developed a more adaptive mental framework were far more successful. This framework involved a willingness to confront discomfort, to view challenges not as insurmountable obstacles, but as opportunities for learning and self-discovery. It was about shifting from a mindset of avoidance to one of engagement. Think of it like learning to ride a bicycle. At first, you wobble, you fall, you get scraped knees. If your only goal is to avoid falling, you'll never learn to ride. But if you embrace the falls as part of the process, you learn balance, you build strength, and you eventually pedal with confidence. The review of literature provided compelling evidence that interventions focusing on self-regulation skills, particularly emotional regulation and cognitive reframing, yielded the most significant and lasting improvements. These are not about simply telling yourself to stop procrastinating. They are about fundamentally changing your internal dialogue and your relationship with difficulty. One of the key findings was the impact of self-compassion. When individuals were able to treat themselves with kindness and understanding when they struggled, rather than with harsh self-criticism, They were more likely to try again and to learn from their mistakes. This was a profound revelation, challenging the common notion that tough self-discipline is the only path to success. Consider a student who receives a poor grade on an assignment. The self-critical approach might be, "I'm so stupid, I'll never be good enough." This leads to avoidance and further procrastination. The self-compassionate approach, however, might be, "This is disappointing, but it's okay. What can I learn from this experience to do better next time?" This opens the door to growth. The researchers observed that many traditional academic support programs inadvertently reinforced a cycle of shame and avoidance. By focusing heavily on consequences and external accountability, without addressing the emotional underpinnings of procrastination, they often left students feeling more discouraged and less capable. This is a critical point many well-meaning individuals and institutions miss. They offer solutions that are like putting a Band-Aid on a deep wound. The immediate problem might seem addressed, but the underlying issue festers, ready to resurface at the next opportunity. The academic review highlighted a particular study where participants were taught to identify their emotional triggers for procrastination. Instead of just pushing through the discomfort of a difficult task, they learned to acknowledge their feelings of anxiety, overwhelm, or boredom. This acknowledgement was the first step towards managing them. Once these emotions were recognized, participants were then guided in reframing their thoughts. For instance, instead of thinking, "This is too hard," they might reframe it as, "This is challenging, and I can break it down into smaller, manageable steps." This simple cognitive shift can be incredibly powerful. The impact of this approach was measured by a significant reduction in self-reported procrastination and an increase in task completion rates. More importantly, participants reported a greater sense of control over their academic work and a reduction in associated stress and anxiety. They were not just completing tasks, they were transforming their relationship with them. This is the essence of the resilience paradox. We often think that avoiding difficulty builds our strength, that pushing through without acknowledging our feelings is the mark of a strong person. But the science suggests the opposite is true. True resilience is built by engaging with difficulty, by allowing ourselves to feel the discomfort, and by learning to navigate it with a compassionate and adaptable mindset. Let's delve deeper into what makes this so challenging. Why do so many of us fall into the trap of avoidance, even when we know it's detrimental to our long-term goals? It often stems from deeply ingrained beliefs about ourselves and our capabilities. For example, many people operate under a fixed mindset. They believe their intelligence and abilities are set in stone. When faced with a challenging task, their immediate thought is, "If I struggle, it means I'm not smart enough." This fear of appearing inadequate leads them to avoid the challenge altogether, thus perpetuating the procrastination cycle. This fear of judgment, both from others and from ourselves, is a powerful driver of avoidance. We create elaborate justifications for delaying tasks, convincing ourselves that we'll be more productive later or when circumstances are perfect. Of course, perfect circumstances rarely arrive, and later becomes an endless loop. The academic literature also touched upon the concept of emotional labor. This refers to the effort required to manage and express emotions that are considered appropriate in a given situation, even if they are not genuinely felt. In the context of procrastination, it's the emotional energy we expend trying to suppress our anxieties or self-doubt about a task. This emotional labor is exhausting. It depletes our mental resources, making it even harder to focus on the task at hand. It's like trying to run a marathon while carrying a heavy backpack filled with rocks. The effort required to simply move forward is immense, let alone to perform well. The researchers found that interventions that helped individuals reduce this emotional labor were particularly effective. This involved teaching them to accept their emotions rather than fighting them. By acknowledging that it's okay to feel anxious or overwhelmed, they could then redirect that energy towards the task itself. Consider the story of Sarah, a university student who consistently struggled with her literature essays. She would spend hours staring at a blank page, her mind racing with self-doubt. She tried all the usual tricks, to-do lists, setting timers, even promising herself rewards. Nothing made a lasting difference. Sarah's turning point came when she participated in a workshop based on the principles outlined in the academic review. She learned to identify the specific feelings that arose when she thought about her essays. A knot in her stomach, a racing heart, a sense of dread. Instead of pushing these feelings away, she was encouraged to simply notice them. She practiced a technique called mindful acknowledgement. When the familiar feeling of dread surfaced, she would pause and say to herself, "I am feeling anxious about this essay right now." This simple act of naming the emotion began to diffuse its power. It was no longer a monstrous, all-consuming force, but a recognizable feeling that she could observe. Then she learned to reframe her thoughts. Instead of "this is impossible," she would consciously shift to "I can start by reading just one paragraph." This small, manageable step felt achievable. It wasn't about completing the entire essay in one sitting, but about making incremental progress. The measurable result for Sarah was significant. Within a semester, her essay grades improved by an average of 15%. More importantly, her anxiety levels surrounding academic work decreased dramatically. She reported feeling more in control and less burdened by her studies. She discovered that by facing her discomfort, she actually made the task easier. This is the core of the resilience paradox at play. It's not about being fearless. It's about being willing to feel fear and act anyway. It's about understanding that discomfort is not a sign of weakness, but a natural part of growth and learning. The scientific literature suggests that many of us have been conditioned to believe that avoiding discomfort is the optimal strategy. We see it in childhood, where we might be praised for not crying when we fall, or in societal narratives that glorify stoicism and emotional repression. This conditioning, however, can be deeply detrimental to our long-term well-being and achievement. The review of literature emphasized the importance of self-efficacy. This is your belief in your ability to succeed in specific situations or accomplish a task. When you avoid challenging tasks, you implicitly lower your self-efficacy. You tell yourself, "I can't handle this," which becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Conversely, when you engage with a challenge, even if you don't succeed perfectly, you build your self-efficacy. Each attempt, each lesson learned, reinforces the belief that you are capable of facing difficulties and learning from them. This is how true resilience is forged. The researchers identified 3 common mistakes that people make when trying to overcome procrastination, mistakes that directly undermine their efforts and reinforce the cycle of avoidance. Understanding these pitfalls is crucial for breaking free. The first mistake is the belief that you need to feel motivated to start. Many people wait for inspiration to strike, for that magical surge of energy that will make the task effortless. However, motivation often follows action, not the other way around. By waiting for motivation, you are essentially waiting for a feeling that may never arrive. This is like waiting for the perfect weather to go for a run. If you only run when it's sunny and 70 degrees, you'll likely never run at all. The act of running itself, the physical exertion and the endorphin release, often generates the motivation to continue. The second mistake is the tendency to catastrophize. This involves imagining the worst possible outcomes of a task. You might think, if I start this project, I'll fail, and everyone will see how incompetent I am. This exaggerated fear paralyzes you, making the task seem far more daunting than it actually is. The academic review highlighted that this catastrophizing is often fueled by a lack of concrete planning and a reliance on vague fears. When you break down a task into smaller, actionable steps, the potential for disaster diminishes significantly. You can focus on completing one small step at a time, rather than being overwhelmed by the enormity of the entire endeavor. The third and perhaps most insidious mistake is the practice of self-sabotage through perfectionism. This isn't about striving for excellence. It's about setting impossibly high standards that ensure you never feel good enough to start or finish. The fear of not being perfect becomes a reason not to begin at all. This form of procrastination is particularly tricky because it masquerades as dedication. You tell yourself you're just being thorough, that you want to do the best job possible. But in reality, the pressure to be flawless creates an insurmountable barrier. It's the fear of imperfection that prevents any progress. The scientific evidence strongly suggests that a shift in perspective is necessary. Instead of viewing procrastination as a character flaw, it should be understood as a learned behavior, a coping mechanism that, while perhaps serving a short-term purpose, ultimately hinders growth and well-being. The interventions that proved most effective involved teaching individuals to actively manage their emotional responses to challenging tasks. This wasn't about suppressing emotions, but about acknowledging them, understanding their origins, and then choosing to act despite them. Let me explain this with a simple metaphor. Imagine you are trying to cross a river. The current is strong and the water is cold. Your instinct might be to stay on the bank, to avoid the discomfort and the potential danger. This is avoidance. However, a resilient approach would be to acknowledge the cold water and the strong current. You might say, "This is going to be uncomfortable and I might struggle a bit." Then, you would take a deep breath, perhaps find the shallowest point and begin to move through the water, one step at a time. You don't ignore the difficulty, you navigate it. The academic review emphasized that the key to successful intervention lies in empowering individuals to become their own strategists. It's not about being told what to do, but about learning the tools and mental frameworks to figure it out for themselves. This involves developing what is sometimes called metacognition, which is essentially thinking about your own thinking. It means becoming aware of your thought processes, your emotional reactions, and your behavioral patterns. When you understand how you operate, you can then begin to make conscious choices to change those patterns. One powerful technique that emerged from the research is the concept of implementation intentions. This is a specific type of planning that involves creating a predetermined plan for how you will respond to a particular situation. It's not just about setting a goal. It's about deciding in advance when, where, and how you will act. For example, instead of saying, "I will study for my exam," an implementation intention would be, "If it is Tuesday evening at 7 p.m. and I am at my desk, then I will open my textbook and read for 30 minutes. This creates a clear, actionable plan that bypasses the need for immediate motivation. It removes the decision-making from the moment of potential procrastination. The scientific studies consistently showed that individuals who used implementation intentions experienced significantly less procrastination and higher rates of task completion. They were more effective at overcoming the urge to delay because they had already made the decision to act. This approach is particularly effective because it shifts the focus from the overwhelming task itself to a small, manageable action. It leverages the power of habit and pre-commitment to overcome the inertia of avoidance. It's about making the desired behavior automatic. The research also underscored the importance of breaking down large tasks into their smallest constituent parts. When a task feels immense, the brain naturally seeks to avoid it. However, when a task is broken down into tiny, almost insignificant steps, it becomes much easier to initiate. Think about cleaning a very messy room. The sheer volume of clutter can be overwhelming. But if you focus on just one small area, like clearing off a single shelf, the task feels much more manageable. Once that shelf is clear, you might feel motivated to tackle the next small area. This principle of task decomposition is a cornerstone of effective self-regulation. It's about making the barrier to entry as low as possible. The goal is not to accomplish the entire task at once, but to initiate the process. Momentum often builds from there. The academic review provided a wealth of evidence that supports this nuanced understanding of procrastination and resilience. It moves beyond simplistic advice and delves into the complex interplay of psychology, behavior, and environment. The findings are not about finding a magic bullet, but about cultivating a more adaptive and compassionate approach to challenges. The key takeaway is that true resilience is not about being impervious to difficulty. It is about developing the capacity to engage with difficulty, to learn from it, and to grow stronger through the process. It's about understanding that discomfort is not an enemy to be avoided, but a signal that you are on the edge of growth. The science is clear. The strategies that focus on brute force and ignoring your feelings are ultimately counterproductive. They lead to burnout, anxiety, and a persistent feeling of being stuck. The path to lasting change lies in a more gentle, yet more powerful approach. This involves cultivating self-awareness, practicing self-compassion, and developing practical strategies for navigating discomfort. It is about transforming your relationship with challenges, viewing them not as threats, but as opportunities. The research suggests that by implementing these principles, you can move beyond simply enduring your challenges and begin to truly grow from them. You can build a level of resilience that allows you to face whatever comes your way with greater confidence and a deeper sense of self-efficacy. The journey of overcoming procrastination and building resilience is not a sprint. It is a marathon. It requires patience, persistence, and a willingness to learn and adapt. But the rewards, both in terms of achievement and well-being, are immeasurable. The science offers us a roadmap, but the journey is yours to take. Consider Sarah, a talented graphic designer who found herself consistently missing deadlines. She felt the familiar knot of anxiety tighten as a major client project loomed, a project that could significantly elevate her career. For weeks, she'd stared at the blank canvas, paralyzed by the sheer scope of the work required. Her usual procrastination tactics, like endless social media scrolling and reorganizing her digital files, offered only fleeting distraction. She knew she needed to act, but the initial step felt like climbing Mount Everest in flip-flops. The pressure mounted with each passing day, and Sarah's self-criticism grew louder. She'd always prided herself on her creativity, yet here she was, creatively blocked by her own avoidance. Her mind raced with worst-case scenarios, disappointing the client, damaging her reputation, losing future opportunities. This internal turmoil only amplified her desire to escape, perpetuating the cycle. She felt trapped in a loop of intention and inaction, a common human experience that can feel incredibly isolating. One evening, scrolling through an online forum for designers, she stumbled upon a discussion about implementation intentions. The concept resonated deeply because it offered a concrete, actionable strategy, something beyond mere willpower. The idea of pre-deciding when and where she would work on a specific task, even for a short duration, felt surprisingly manageable. It wasn't about forcing herself to complete the entire project, but about making a commitment to a tiny piece of it. Sarah decided to experiment. She chose a small, manageable component of the client project, designing the initial concept sketches. Her implementation intention was simple yet precise. Tomorrow morning, at exactly 8 a.m., I will sit at my desk with my sketchbook and pencils for 30 minutes and begin drawing the first 3 concept ideas. She wrote this down in her planner, not just as a thought, but as a commitment. The next morning, her alarm buzzed. The urge to hit snooze and retreat back into the comfort of her duvet was strong. But the pre-made decision, the almost automatic trigger of the alarm at 8 a.m., pulled her forward. She didn't think about the entire project or even the full 30 minutes. She simply focused on the immediate action, sitting at her desk and picking up her pencil. Those 30 minutes were not a revelation of artistic genius. Some sketches were rough, others felt uninspired, but the critical difference was that she started. She broke through the inertia. By the end of the session, she had 3 distinct concept sketches. More importantly, she had proven to herself that she could initiate the work. The following day, she repeated the process. Her implementation intention became, "Tomorrow, after lunch at 1 p.m., I will add details to the 3 concept sketches I drew yesterday for 45 minutes. Again, the pre-commitment made the decision easier. She wasn't facing a blank page. She was building on a foundation. This iterative process, this small, consistent engagement, began to chip away at the overwhelming nature of the project. Over the next week, Sarah continued to apply this strategy. She broke down each stage of the design process into small, actionable steps, coupled with specific implementation intentions. Instead of thinking, "I need to design the logo," she thought, "This afternoon at 2 p.m., I will spend 20 minutes exploring font options for the logo." Each small victory built momentum, and the anxiety began to recede, replaced by a sense of control and accomplishment. The measurable result was undeniable. Sarah delivered the client project 2 days ahead of schedule, and the feedback was exceptionally positive. The client was impressed not only with the quality of the work, but also with her timely delivery. This success wasn't a fluke. It was the direct consequence of a conscious shift in her approach to challenges. She had moved from enduring the pressure of deadlines to actively growing her capacity to meet them. Now let's delve into the mechanism behind this transformation. Imagine your brain as a sophisticated navigation system, constantly charting the most efficient course. When faced with a large, daunting task like Sarah's design project, your brain perceives it as a vast, uncharted territory. The default setting, the path of least resistance, is often to avoid entering this territory altogether, leading to procrastination. It's like your navigation system flashing a warning: destination too far. Rerouting to comfort zone. Implementation intentions act like pre-programmed GPS coordinates. Instead of presenting your brain with a vague, overwhelming destination, you provide it with a specific, immediate route. Turn left at the next street, drive for 5 minutes, then pull over. This tiny, actionable instruction bypasses the brain's avoidance circuitry. It's not about reaching the final destination. It's about initiating the journey. Your brain, presented with a clear, simple command, is far more likely to comply. It's like giving your navigation system a short, achievable leg of the journey to focus on, rather than the entire cross-country trip. This mechanism works because it leverages the power of automaticity. Our brains are wired to create habits, to automate recurring actions to conserve mental energy. By setting a specific time and place for a task, you are essentially creating a trigger for a new habit. The alarm goes off at 8 a.m., and the habit of sitting at your desk kicks in, bypassing the need for conscious decision-making and willpower. You're not relying on a surge of motivation. You're relying on a pre-established cue. This is where the unexpected twist, the paradox, emerges. We often believe that the greatest challenge in overcoming procrastination and building resilience lies in confronting the overwhelming magnitude of the task. We think we need more willpower, more determination, more grit to simply push through the difficulty. But the science and Sarah's story suggest the opposite. The true power lies not in confronting the enormity, but in meticulously dissecting it into its smallest, most manageable components. The paradox is this: the more we try to force ourselves to tackle a huge problem head-on, the more likely we are to be overwhelmed and avoid it. Conversely, By focusing our efforts on the tiniest, most insignificant initial steps, we create a pathway for engagement. It's like trying to move a mountain by the sheer force of your will versus moving it one pebble at a time. The latter, seemingly insignificant action, is the one that actually moves the mountain. This shifts our perspective entirely. Instead of seeing difficulty as an insurmountable wall, we begin to see it as a series of small, navigable steps. This doesn't diminish the ultimate goal, but it reframes the process of achieving it. It's a profound shift from enduring hardship to actively cultivating growth through manageable engagement. The unanswered question from our earlier discussion about resilience is how to maintain this approach when the challenges become truly profound, when the pebbles still feel daunting. How do we sustain this momentum when the stakes are incredibly high and the initial steps are fraught with uncertainty? The science offers us a glimpse, but the full answer still lies in the ongoing practice, in the continuous refinement of our mental frameworks. We've seen how Sarah transformed her situation, moving from a state of anxious avoidance to proactive engagement. She didn't magically become more motivated. She strategically changed her approach to initiating action. This is the essence of building resilience, not by becoming immune to challenges, but by developing a robust and adaptive system for engaging with them. The journey continues, and each small step forward is a testament to the power of understanding and applying these principles. This is where the true test of resilience emerges. It's not just about enduring the storm, but about learning to dance in the rain, as they say. We've explored the power of breaking down overwhelming tasks into tiny, manageable steps, a strategy that bypasses our brain's natural inclination to avoid difficulty. But what happens when even those tiny steps feel like climbing Mount Everest? What happens when the weight of circumstances presses down, making even the simplest action feel impossible? This is the critical juncture where mere endurance falters and true growth begins. Let me tell you about David. David was a talented graphic designer working for a small but ambitious startup. For months, the company had been on the cusp of landing a massive client, a deal that would secure their future and propel them into the big leagues. David was instrumental in creating the pitch materials, spending countless late nights perfecting every visual detail. Then, disaster struck. The client, at the 11th hour, decided to go with a competitor. The air went out of the office, layoffs were inevitable. David, along with many of his colleagues, found himself unexpectedly unemployed. The vibrant energy of the startup evaporated, replaced by a chilling silence and a gnawing sense of uncertainty. David's initial reaction was a deep plunge into despair. He had poured so much of himself into that project, believing it was the launchpad for his career. Now, it felt like a colossal waste of time and effort. He spent days staring at the ceiling, the weight of his situation crushing him. The thought of updating his resume, networking, or even applying for jobs felt utterly exhausting. It was like being asked to run a marathon when you've just been through a devastating injury. Every potential action seemed too big, too daunting. He was enduring, yes, but he wasn't growing. He was shrinking. His wife, Sarah, noticed his withdrawal. She understood the disappointment, the sting of rejection, but she also saw the potential for him to get stuck in this state of passive suffering. One evening, she sat beside him, not with platitudes, but with a quiet observation. "David," she said gently, "you've always been so good at seeing the details in your designs. What's the smallest detail you can focus on right now?" David, lost in his gloom, barely registered the question. He mumbled something about not knowing. Sarah persisted, her voice still calm and steady. "Just one thing. What's the very first, tiniest step you could take, not to land a new job, but just to feel a flicker of control?" David's mind, accustomed to the grand narratives of success and failure, struggled to find a tiny step. He thought about his LinkedIn profile. Updating it felt like a Herculean task. He thought about reaching out to former colleagues. That felt too vulnerable. Then, Sarah's words echoed in his mind, just to feel a flicker of control. He remembered a small, almost forgotten folder on his computer filled with old design sketches, ideas he'd had before the startup, projects that had never seen the light of day. They were just doodles, really unfinished concepts. He looked at Sarah. "Maybe," he said slowly, "I could just open that folder, just look at it." Sarah smiled, a genuine, hopeful smile. "That's it," she affirmed. "Just open the folder, that's your one tiny step for today." That night, David, with a profound sense of reluctance, navigated his computer and opened the folder. It was dusty, metaphorically speaking. He saw sketches of logos for imaginary companies, character designs for games that would never be made, abstract patterns that had no purpose. It wasn't a path to a new career. It was a glimpse into a forgotten part of himself. He spent perhaps 10 minutes scrolling through, a strange mix of melancholy and curiosity washing over him. He didn't feel a surge of motivation, but he did feel a tiny, almost imperceptible shift. He had taken an action, however small, that was entirely within his control. The next day, Sarah asked him, "What's your tiny step today?" David hesitated. He didn't want to open the same folder, but he remembered the feeling, however faint, of having done something. He thought about the sketches. He picked one, a rough idea for a children's book illustration. I'll sketch one more detail on that one," he decided. Again, it was a small, almost insignificant act. He wasn't thinking about a new book deal. He was just adding a line to a drawing. This became David's new rhythm. He didn't force himself to apply for jobs. He didn't network with relentless ambition. Instead, he focused on these minuscule, self-directed actions. He would spend 15 minutes sketching. He would spend 10 minutes organizing his digital portfolio. He would spend 5 minutes researching a font he found interesting. Each action was deliberately small, designed to be so easy that his brain couldn't offer much resistance. He was not trying to endure the pain of unemployment. He was actively cultivating moments of engagement, however fleeting. The measurable result wasn't immediate career success. It was more subtle, more profound. David began to feel a sense of agency returning. The crushing weight of despair started to lift, not because his circumstances changed, but because he was actively engaging with his own capabilities again. He wasn't waiting for an external force to rescue him. He was building his own internal engine, one tiny spark at a time. He started to feel less like a victim of circumstance and more like a creator of his own small moments of progress. This subtle shift in his internal landscape was the precursor to external change. After a few weeks of this micro-action strategy, David found himself browsing online design communities. He saw a call for illustrators for a new independent children's book publisher. The pay wasn't spectacular, and the publisher was small, but the project description resonated with him. He remembered those sketches in his forgotten folder. He felt a genuine interest, not the desperate need of someone trying to survive. He decided to apply. The application itself felt like a series of small steps, gathering his best sketches, writing a brief, honest cover letter, submitting the files. He wasn't trying to win the lottery. He was just completing a series of manageable tasks. He got the job. It wasn't the high-stakes deal he had lost, but it was work that he found fulfilling. More importantly, it was work that he had actively pursued by engaging with his own skills, one tiny step at a time. The children's book was a success, leading to more opportunities. David didn't just endure the hardship of losing his job, he grew through it. He didn't just survive the uncertainty, he navigated it by mastering the art of the infinitesimally small action. Now let's delve into how this mechanism works, not just in David's life, but in our own brains. Imagine your brain is like a vast, ancient forest. Within this forest are well-trodden paths leading to familiar places like your daily routine or ingrained habits. These paths are easy to follow, requiring little conscious effort. Then there are areas of the forest that are overgrown, dense with underbrush, dark and intimidating. These are the places representing new challenges, difficult tasks, or areas of uncertainty. When faced with a large, daunting task, your brain instinctively recoils from entering that dense, overgrown part of the forest. It prefers the safety and ease of the well-trodden paths. The thought of forging a new path through the thicket feels overwhelming, even dangerous. It triggers an internal alarm system, signaling potential failure or excessive effort. This is why procrastination is so rampant. Our brains are wired to protect us from perceived threats, and a massive task can feel like a significant threat. What we are doing when we break down a task into tiny steps is not just making the task easier. We are subtly changing the terrain of the forest. Instead of trying to hack through the entire overgrown section at once, we are finding a single, almost invisible deer trail, or even just a slight parting in the bushes. We are creating a miniature, manageable entry point. This tiny opening doesn't require hacking or brute force. It's just a small gap that your brain can navigate without triggering its avoidance circuits. Think of it like this. The feeling of being overwhelmed is like standing at the edge of a vast, dark jungle, and your brain says, "Nope, too dangerous, too much effort, stay where it's safe." But when you identify the absolute smallest, most achievable first step, like finding a single, faint animal track leading into the trees, your brain's response shifts. It's no longer about conquering the entire jungle. It's about following that one tiny, almost invisible track for a few feet. The perceived threat level plummets, the danger signal is silenced. Your brain, instead of screaming abort, whispers, "Okay, I can do that." This is the power of the prefrontal cortex bypass. Our prefrontal cortex, responsible for executive functions like planning and decision-making, can get easily overwhelmed by large, complex challenges. It can freeze up. But by focusing on a minuscule, concrete action, we engage more primitive parts of our brain that are adept at immediate, simple responses. It's like giving a very simple, immediate instruction to a child. Take one step forward. They can do that. Asking them to walk to the end of the street might be too much. We are essentially giving our brain a series of simple, immediate commands that it can execute without much deliberation or anxiety. And here's the unexpected twist, the paradox that truly redefines resilience. We often think of resilience as the ability to withstand immense pressure, to absorb blows without breaking. We imagine a warrior standing firm against a barrage of attacks, absorbing each hit with stoic determination. But this view, while admirable, can be misleading. True resilience, the kind that leads to growth, is not about absorbing. It's about adapting and evolving through engagement. It's not about being a fortress that withstands siege. It's about being a river that flows around obstacles, carving new paths. The paradox is this: the more we try to endure a difficult situation by simply holding on, by resisting change, the more depleted we become. Endurance without adaptation is like a dam holding back an ever-increasing flood. Eventually, something has to give, and it's often the dam itself. This is where the listener might feel a sense of unease, perhaps recognizing their own struggles with simply toughing it out. But growth-oriented resilience is different. It's about recognizing that the siege is not something to be passively endured, but an opportunity to learn and change. It's about actively seeking out the tiny steps that allow us to adapt and move forward, even while the pressure is still on. David didn't wait for the layoffs to end before he started engaging with his skills. He found ways to engage within the difficult circumstances. He wasn't trying to endure the unemployment. He was growing through the process of rediscovering his creative drive. This is the crucial difference between merely surviving and truly thriving. Endurance can lead to burnout and stagnation. Growth, however, fueled by small, consistent actions, builds momentum and self-efficacy. It transforms challenges from insurmountable obstacles into stepping stones. The unanswered question from our earlier discussion: was how to sustain this approach when challenges are profound and initial steps feel daunting. The answer lies in understanding that these small steps are not just about completing a task. They are about cultivating a mindset of continuous adaptation and engagement. They are the building blocks of a resilient self, not by becoming unyielding, but by becoming fluid and responsive. The power of the tiny step is not in its size, but in its ability to initiate movement. It's the gentle nudge that sets a boulder rolling downhill. Once the boulder is in motion, gravity and momentum do the heavy lifting. Our brains, when presented with these minuscule, achievable actions, begin to generate their own momentum. The initial resistance dissolves, replaced by a quiet hum of activity. This is not about brute force willpower. It's about intelligent design of our engagement with challenges. Think about a plant pushing through concrete. It doesn't have the strength to shatter the concrete. Instead, it finds the tiniest crack, a microscopic weakness. It grows into that weakness, slowly, persistently expanding the crack until it can break through. That tiny crack is the initial, almost imperceptible step. The plant doesn't endure the concrete. It grows through it, adapting and expanding. This is the essence of growth-oriented resilience. It's about finding those tiny cracks in our own difficult circumstances and allowing ourselves to grow into them. The journey David embarked on wasn't a sudden transformation. There were days when even opening that folder felt like too much. But the key was that he had established a pattern, a habit of seeking out the smallest possible action. He wasn't aiming for perfection. He was aiming for initiation. And in that initiation, he found not just a way to cope, but a pathway to renewal. This is the promise of understanding and applying these principles, not just to endure the storms of life, but to learn how to harness their energy and grow stronger with every gust of wind. The exploration continues, for within these seemingly small actions lies the profound potential for extraordinary change and enduring strength. It's so easy to fall into certain traps when we face difficulties, isn't it? We believe we're doing the right thing, but we're actually setting ourselves up for more struggle. One of the most common mistakes is waiting for the perfect moment to start, believing that inspiration or clarity will strike like lightning. This often leads to what researchers call academic procrastination, where tasks are put off until the perceived pressure is unbearable, diminishing the quality of the outcome and increasing stress. Think about that important project that's been looming for weeks. You know you need to start, but you tell yourself you'll feel more motivated tomorrow, or when you have a clearer idea of the exact direction. This waiting game is a form of passive endurance, hoping the problem will somehow resolve itself, or that a sudden burst of genius will appear. However, this approach rarely works and often makes the task feel even more overwhelming when you finally have to confront it. Another significant misstep is the tendency to focus solely on the overwhelming enormity of the challenge, rather than breaking it down into manageable components. When faced with a mountain, it's natural to feel paralyzed by its sheer size. We see the summit and despair, forgetting that every great climb begins with a single step. This all-or-nothing thinking prevents us from taking any action at all. Imagine trying to learn a new skill that requires months of practice. If you only focus on becoming a master overnight, you'll likely give up before you even begin. The overwhelming scope of the goal becomes a barrier, not a motivator. This is where the idea of enduring can become a trap. We endure the feeling of being stuck rather than actively seeking a way forward, however small. The third mistake, and perhaps the most insidious, is the belief that we must feel completely ready and confident before taking action. This internal checklist of readiness can become an endless loop of self-doubt and hesitation. We convince ourselves that until every doubt is silenced and every potential obstacle is foreseen, we shouldn't move. This creates a paralyzing fear of failure, leading us to inaction. Consider someone wanting to start a small business. They might spend years researching every possible market trend, developing intricate business plans, and seeking constant validation, all because they don't feel ready to launch. This internal resistance, this demand for perfect preparation, is a subtle form of self-sabotage that prevents genuine growth. These three common pitfalls, waiting for the perfect moment, focusing on the overwhelming whole, and demanding complete readiness, all stem from a passive approach to challenges, a form of enduring rather than actively growing through them. Now, let's move from recognizing these common errors to building a concrete, step-by-step method for cultivating growth-oriented resilience. This isn't about a quick fix, but about establishing a sustainable mental framework that allows you to adapt and thrive. The foundation of this method is what we call the Microaction Initiative. It's about intentionally engaging with your challenges through incredibly small, almost laughably simple actions. The first step in this process is to identify the specific challenge you are facing. Be precise. Instead of saying, "I feel overwhelmed at work," identify a concrete area of overwhelm like, "I need to complete the quarterly report," or "I need to address the backlog of emails." Naming the beast makes it less abstract and more approachable. Once you have clearly defined the challenge, your next step is to identify the absolute smallest possible action you could take related to that challenge. I mean truly tiny. For the quarterly report, this might be opening the document and reading the first paragraph. For the email backlog, it could be opening your inbox and reading just one subject line. The key here is to make the action so small that it feels almost absurdly easy to accomplish. There should be no perceived barrier to entry. This is about bypassing the internal resistance that often paralyzes us. You are not aiming to make significant progress. You are aiming to initiate movement. The third step is to commit to performing this microaction consistently. This means doing it every single day or at a predetermined frequency without exception. The goal is not the outcome of the action itself, but the establishment of the habit of engagement. For instance, if your microaction is opening the report document, you do it every day at the same time, even if you don't actually read it or do anything else. This consistent initiation builds momentum. It tells your brain that you are actively engaging, which starts to shift your internal state from passive endurance to active participation. This consistency is what differentiates true resilience from a fleeting burst of effort. Following this consistent initiation, the fourth step involves gently expanding the scope of your microactions as you feel ready. This is not a forced escalation, but a natural evolution. Once opening the report document becomes effortless, you might then commit to reading the first page. If reading one subject line is easy, you might move to reading the first 3. The crucial element here is to always stay just slightly outside your comfort zone, but never so far that you trigger significant resistance. You are continually seeking the next tiny crack to grow into. This gradual expansion builds confidence and reinforces the positive feedback loop of taking action. The fifth step is to reflect on the process, not the outcome. Take a moment each day or week to acknowledge that you took action. Celebrate the small wins of initiation and engagement. This reflection is not about judging your progress, but about reinforcing the positive behavior. You are training your brain to associate taking these small steps with a sense of accomplishment, however minimal. This positive reinforcement is vital for long-term habit formation and for building a stronger sense of self-efficacy. You are not waiting for external validation. You are creating your own internal validation through consistent action. Finally, the sixth step is to be patient and compassionate with yourself. There will be days when even the microaction feels difficult. On those days, you simply perform the smallest possible version of that microaction, or even just acknowledge your intention to do it. The goal is to maintain the thread of engagement, however thin it may become. Resilience is not about never faltering. It's about having the tools and the mindset to gently pull yourself back into motion. This entire process is about creating a continuous cycle of engagement, adaptation, and growth, transforming challenges from insurmountable obstacles into opportunities for development. Let me share a couple of quick examples to illustrate this in action. Consider Sarah, who was struggling with severe social anxiety and had been avoiding networking events for years. Her challenge was clear: connect with potential collaborators for her freelance graphic design business. She felt completely paralyzed by the thought of attending an event. Using the Microaction Initiative, her first step was to simply open her email and find the invitation to the next local industry mixer. Her microaction was to mark the event as interested on the online platform. She did this every day for 3 days. Then she moved to finding the contact information for the event organizer and sending a single, polite question about parking. This felt incredibly difficult, but she did it. The next step was committing to attend for just 15 minutes. She went, stood near the entrance for her allotted time, and left. The following week, she committed to speaking to one person for 2 minutes. Over the course of several months, through these incredibly small, consistent steps, Sarah gradually built her confidence. She began to engage in brief conversations, then longer ones, and eventually, she secured 2 significant client contracts directly from networking events she previously would have avoided at all costs. Her measurable result was not just the client contracts, but the quantifiable decrease in her reported anxiety levels when attending such events, as evidenced by her own self-assessment journal. Another example is Mark, a software engineer who felt completely stuck in his career. He was bored with his current role and wanted to transition into a more innovative field, but felt he lacked the necessary cutting-edge skills. His challenge was to acquire new technical expertise. His microaction was to spend 10 minutes each evening reading one article from a reputable technology journal. He didn't need to understand every detail. He just needed to expose himself to the new concepts. After a month of this consistent reading, he felt ready for the next micro step, identifying one new programming language that interested him. He then committed to completing one online tutorial module for that language each week. This was a small commitment, only about an hour of focused effort. Within 6 months, Mark had completed several foundational courses and built a small personal project using his new skills. He then updated his resume and began applying for roles in the new field. The measurable result was his successful transition to a new position with a 20% salary increase, a direct outcome of systematically building his knowledge through these tiny, consistent actions rather than waiting for the perfect moment to learn or for a grand plan to materialize. So what is the single action you can take today, right now, to begin cultivating this growth-oriented resilience? It's not about planning for tomorrow or next week. It's about this moment. Find one challenge you are facing, no matter how small it seems. It could be a cluttered desk, an unanswered email, a difficult conversation you've been avoiding, or even just a feeling of inertia. Identify the absolute tiniest, most insignificant action you could take related to that challenge. Perhaps it's simply to open the relevant document, or to pick up the phone, or to write down one sentence about the conversation you need to have. Whatever it is, commit to doing that one tiny action within the next hour. Don't overthink it, don't judge it. Just do it. This is your immediate step towards growth. As you close your eyes tonight, reflect not on what you accomplished, but on the simple act of initiation. You chose to move, however slightly. You chose to engage, however minimally. This is the seed of resilience. It's the quiet whisper that says, I can adapt, I can grow. Remember the plant pushing through concrete. Its power wasn't in brute force, but in finding that infinitesimal crack and growing into it. Your power lies in the same principle. By consistently taking these tiny, intentional steps, you are not just enduring the challenges you face, you are actively growing through them. You are transforming the seemingly insurmountable into a pathway of continuous development and enduring strength. Keep finding those cracks, keep growing.